And here we are at the topic, and today's topic is an absolute juicer. There's loads of ways we can go about this, and I think for us, the easiest way of us doing this, and the one that makes the most sense, is to kind of stick to the most recent news. But just for those that potentially have been living under a rock and you don't know what's happened, there's been even more layoffs. It seems to be every single episode of the podcast we talk about layoffs, and Sony now have joined the list of developers and publishers which are letting people go. Sony have announced that 900 jobs are to be cut. There's been a whole host of studios that are impacted by this. Insomniac, Naughty Dog, Guerrilla, absolutely loads. There's been some closures for studios. Twisted Metal, the game that we were talking about being as a rumor on the last episode, that's apparently been shelved over at Firesprite. It's an absolute mess. It's an absolute mess. Now, we're coming to this news very late. And so instead of focusing on what's already been covered hundreds of times already by everyone else, I think the best thing we can do in this scenario is to dive into the latest bit of news. So Sean Layden was recently on a rival podcast, and he was talking all about the state of the industry, about what's going on, everything. And we got a nice little quote here from him that Spence, do you want to lay this out? Because I think we can talk about this and go off on a different tangent compared to just talking about the layoffs and the state of the industry. That way, we can hit it from a slight different angle, add our own spin on it.
Sure, mate, sure. So again, Sean Layden's thoughts, not mine, but I will read this verbatim. So he says, "We have to scale back the ambition, not the creative ambition, not the entertainment ambition. Again, I want 15 to 20 hour games. As the average age of the gamer has increased over time from early 20s to early 30s, we've seen a swap between people who are time rich and money poor to people who are time poor and money rich. That person can't fit an 80-hour game into their lifestyle. I myself still have Red Dead Redemption 2 in shrink wrap on my shelf. It is way too much."
Nicely read, my friend. So there you have it, Sean Layden himself. So an ex-member of the PlayStation Massive, going off and doing bigger and brighter things. Now, guys, how do you take this approach? Now, the thing I want to preference, obviously, is that right now at the moment, in 2024, we've got 8,000 jobs that have been laid off already this year. 2023, 10,000 plus. It's mad. The gaming industry cannot go the way it is going for the long haul. It just can't. There must be something that needs to change here. Now, in terms of what Sean has laid out here, what are your thoughts? Do you agree with him? How do you think that AAA gaming needs to kind of evolve to be able to, and I suppose not just AAA gaming, just gaming in general needs to evolve to stay relevant? Spence, over to you.
I mean, I understand what he's saying, but I don't agree. I think the majority of AAA games probably are 15 to 20 hour games. At least either that or there's some multiplayer element or something to prolong that gameplay. But for the most part, I think they are 15 to 20 story-wise. But there needs to be exceptions. We need those 80-hour games. If God of War Ragnarok was a 15 to 20-hour game, it would not have been anywhere near as good as it is. There's just no way around it. Same as maybe Last of Us Part 2. Granted, I wanted that to be a bit shorter, but I'm sure it wouldn't have hit the same if it was. There's a reason they make these games as long as they do. And as much as I would prefer a lot of games to be shorter, so maybe my backlog would be a bit shorter too, I think we do need those big games, and there's just no feasible way of getting rid of them without completely changing the way games are made and stories are told.
I think this is the interesting thing here, is that whenever they're talking about game length, I'm at that age, and I'm sure that you guys will agree with me on this, that it's fucking terrifying. You know, like I'm about to walk into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and the thought of that taking me like 70 plus hours scares me. And I wonder, how long am I going to be on this for? How long am I going to be riding this train for? And then, do I then just want to have another big experience coming up soon? Like, say, for example, I was interested in Dragon's Dogma or something else. Would I then want to then step into that and maybe only play 2 games a year because that's all I can fit in? You know, like that's the terrifying. That's something that I've really got to measure these days and think, Christ, like my favorite genre is survival horror. They're 8 hours. Get in and get out. I can do that in a couple of play sessions and it's fucking amazing. And you feel like that, yeah, that was perfect. I agree with him. I agree with Sean on this, that personally, I would like a shorter experience always. But I also agree with you, Spence, in that it's game specific. And there's games that their stories demand to be as long as they need to be able to be as feature complete and to be able to hit those high heights. But I think there's a lot of games that don't need the extra stuff that's included in them. Like if I'm talking about Final Fantasy 16, I adored it. Its story content, its main missions are immense. But for every amazing main mission, there's 2 or 3 bullshit ones where you just go around collecting flowers and bringing them back. Or there's side quest content which adds no value whatsoever. Doesn't have any story impact, doesn't have any character growth, nothing. It's just go here, do this, kill this thing, come back. And you think, well, the time that it's taken them and the resources that it's taken to put that amount of extra work in to be able to make these quests, could they have saved that money and maybe streamlined the game and made it actually so the pacing is phenomenal? I remember when I put my score out for it, I gave it like a 9 out of 10. And I said that one of the reasons why it got let down was because its pacing's all over the fucking shop. You think how many potentially millions they could have saved on their budget if they had streamlined that project, right? And they made that more, not so much just linear, but they made sure that each activity you did had purpose and reason behind it. Like I spoke about Alan Wake 2 earlier, and I said that every single thing you do has gameplay worth, has value to you to go and do that. Did I feel like that when I played FF16? No. I got more resources that I didn't need because I had 500 potions. And I had 500 resources of this stuff that I don't actually need because the other weapons are just better that you get as completing the main quests. I think there's something where games sometimes stretch themselves and they... you can have like a masterpiece experience like God of War, which is everything adds value, it's great, it all works together, everything all builds to make you, you know, kind of deepen the lore or deepen something. And that's kind of the outlier compared to what the general thing is, where they just chuck shit in and you end up doing these bullshit side quests or these totally there's nothing really there to drive the story on in that side quest or that main quest, and you do that just to build up to the next big thing. It's like watching a series of The Walking Dead where you have 6 episodes of shit for 2 episodes of greatness, and it's that season after season after season, when they could just cut that bollocks and just make it really nicely streamlined. And I think there is something there in what he's saying. Now, Phil, I'm kind of just going off here. Do you have any thoughts on what he's been saying?
Just like Dragon Ball Z, isn't it? They should have just cut Snake Way right out of it because they were just making it longer just for longer sake. There was no point in that part of the story. But going back to the point in question, or the article in question, he's not wrong in what he's saying. And I truly think he's speaking to me. It really resonates quite a lot with what he's saying here. We've been saying this type of stuff on the show for a while now. We've dropped it into, you know, news items and probably topics in the past, but I don't think we've really approached this sort of question as a full topic. So it's going to be an interesting one where this one goes. But we do want shorter games. We don't want every game to be that 80 plus hours where you have to go back to it every week. And it takes me a lot longer to complete games than most because I don't have a lot of time. And of course, once in a while I do like to dip in. Death Stranding, I think I racked up about 90 hours, but that was like the one, that was the unicorn in the games that I have. That was the standout that I wanted to invest that amount of that time. And I still want those to exist. I don't want those to be, you know, cut out. And I don't want games to be, you know, cut down at detriment to the market, because some people out there, they strive for those bigger experiences because they have the time to put into them, and that's what they get out of gaming. But me personally, and I think the vast majority of sort of PlayStation owners and people that buy games on this system, it's an aging market. We're time poor, but we're money rich. So having those shorter experiences we can buy more often, I think is a no-brainer for Sony. But whenever this conversation does come up and I think about that aging market and I think about my position on PlayStation, it always just, highlights the fact that PlayStation don't really market games for kids. I think it's just a kind of no-brainer as well that there's kind of a gap with PlayStation, that they could make a lot of money here. Because if they think about the majority of games, they're looking at me for those games, or they're looking at us for those type of games. Like, there's not many games that come out and we go, well, I wouldn't touch that. It's a kid's game. Like, there just isn't that really on PlayStation. You get the odd sprinkling now and again that comes out, but they don't really push that aspect. Look at Nintendo, okay? Every game is made for everybody. But PlayStation, it's like your 20 to 30s or 40s. 40s that will play these games. They don't really go for the child market. So I think they're missing a trick on that respect. But I've got to agree with pretty much everything that was in that article, lads.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, not to move it too far off, but yeah, I agree. I think the PlayStation is missing a boat with these kind of kid-friendly experiences, because there is something there. I mean, we'll see this year. If Astrobot comes out and it does well, maybe it will be something that they can then put more time into and more focus in. I think the difference is between PlayStation and, say, someone like Nintendo. Nintendo are constantly dealing with the fact that their hardware is always low spec. They're constantly behind. You can't have, or it's very difficult to have a type of game that PlayStation does on a Switch, because PlayStation's all about moving the medium onwards, be that in storytelling or in technical ability or whatever it is. Switch struggles to do anything like that. Like Zelda, great, it's got a great story to it, but no one's going to look at it and be like, wow, that was incredibly impressive experience that really captivated my mind. No, it's just that they have to rely on their gameplay to be able to carry the games. And would I personally prefer that? Yes, I would. I prefer that approach. Gameplay is king every single fucking time. Definitely is. It's why, like, Returnal, I rate it so highly. It certainly doesn't look anywhere near as good as some of the best looking games on the PlayStation, but it plays better than most of them. I think, for me, when it comes to this, when you look at the video game landscape and you see that Spider-Man, for example, we learned, unfortunately thanks to the hacks, that Spider-Man 2 cost $300 million to make. Spider-Man 1 cost $100 million. Where the fuck did that $200 million go? That's the big question for me. Because the game wasn't longer. It didn't have more content to it. Sure, it was more technically impressive, but $200 million worth of impressive? I wouldn't say so. It was great. It looked good. But it didn't fucking blow my mind. I didn't look at it and be like, Jesus Christ, it's like the PS6. Like, an extra $200 million. Where did that fucking go? Like, I think this is the thing where they can look at it and say, like, we were talking last episode, Phil, about Hiroki Totoki coming in with a money stick, right? And being like, you gotta fucking calm down. You gotta plan better. You gotta make sure all your ducks are in a line. I think this is the thing now, is that you can't fuck around anymore. Like, things are expensive to run, and you either gotta have it all pretty much nailed out from the production side before then you go into full production. I think that whereas historically what's probably been a massive driver in the video game industry is that, and I suppose with anything that's grown from being such a kind of grassroots thing as video gaming to what it is now, is, you know, such a multi-billion-dollar industry, the biggest entertainment industry on the planet. You've got people that went in and were always like, you think about early Insomniac or whatever, making like Crash Bandicoot. They probably went in with like 100 different ideas. It all kind of cobbled together in the process, and Crash Bandicoot was made. These days, you can't do that. You've got like a 4-year cycle of video games to be able to make it. They probably need to cut that down and have it on a 3-year cycle, but just have like a year worth where there's maybe like 3 people working on the production side to be able to get it super tightly laid out how it's going to work, how they're going to get it all to market before they ramp it up, rather than you got a full team go at it. Got the art people coming in. No, that art. No, we changed tack now. We're not having a female character anymore. We're having a male character. Take it all back to fucking brass tacks. Let's all redo it again. Wasting all this resource, wasting all this time, rather than just having a neatly laid out plan that you kind of just tick through and follow through to completion, cutting a year off and saving a shit ton of money on the back end. that's the way I think that things in the game industry have to go. They have to just tighten up their approach and be, I hate saying this, but probably be a little bit more corporate in it. In a way that you're not just so free-forming and it's just a collaborative process. You probably have to be a bit stricter if you're working toward these AAA aesthetics. If you're an indie studio, 2-man team, fucking experiment all you want, right? You're probably paying yourself like 20 grand a year, probably, like really low, just to get it through. And it's like more of a passion project that you're doing on the sidelines rather than anything else. But when you're steering something that, if it doesn't hit, it has a severe impact on the share price of the company. It has a severe impact on the balance book for that company. You can't miss. And you also can't fuck around like Naughty Dog have done now for years, where they've wasted all this millions and millions of dollars for nothing. You cannot do that in this day and age. It's too expensive to do that. And so I feel like production needs to tighten up, and that's how you can save the money. And I don't think you need to hamper the game's ability to be as long as it needs to be. I think it's just that each hour has to have kind of a monetary value associated to it from the studio head's point of view.
I'm not sure if I agree 100%, because ultimately I'm a gamer. I am the target market, as we've spoke about previously. And if they're going to go through with said cuts that you're sort of describing there, Davey, I do worry that the future looks rather grim for gaming, and we will suffer because of those cutbacks, okay? And ultimately, we don't live in that idealistic world where you can make these plans and everyone, follows them throughout the cycle of creating these games, because as you said, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of money. Things fly out of control when you're, working on these size of projects. But like, at the moment, everything is going up in price, okay? I think that's more to the point and more the reason behind we're seeing this reaction at the moment within the gaming industry, because of the price of games and the price of literally everything. Have you seen how much electricity costs these days? Okay? And it's not just electricity. Have you seen how much bananas cost these days? Fuck me, everything is going up in price. And if I'm going to Sainsbury's and I'm paying an extra tenner on what I normally pay, just think about these prices now when they're trying to put together a multi-million-pound video game. I just think it's a reaction to the current economics that's happening at the moment. And I think, yes, foot off the gas with the amount of games that you're trying to push through at this moment, because they're going to cost a lot of money. But when things calm down, because a market will recover, it will naturally recover, okay? This is just the worst part of the market. We're at the peak of the mountain, at least I hope. This is the time just to step back a little bit. There's enough games out on PlayStation. We are very happy with what's out on PlayStation at the moment. We don't need a new AAA every couple of months on PlayStation. I would want one, but I don't need one, okay? We're not Xbox, okay? They need this to happen for them at the moment, and they're fucked because of the economy, okay? Because they don't have the money to be able to produce these massive titles, okay? But for PlayStation, we have them cooking, and we've had them cooking for a while. And there's games out in the market where everyone are very, very happy. So foot off the gas in the production, and I think we need to just wait, ride this out until the markets recover, and then we need to continue with the quality that we're used to. That's my viewpoint on it. How are you feeling, Spence?
I mean, you boys have said a lot, and I agree with both of you in certain aspects. I don't think we should kind of make it more corporate. As much as I understand the money-saving aspect and all that, we would ultimately, like you said, Phil, lose as the gamers. Because you got to think how many mechanics or kind of fun missions in games were just ideas that were chucked out. And if it was a corporate world, they'd say, no, we're not doing that. We've got a plan. Can't do that. Imagine Spider-Man 2 without the web wings, or something like that, a core mechanic to the game, and that might have just been a creative idea someone chucked in during the mix. You never know. Games wouldn't be what they are now, and games are at an all-time peak, I would say, currently. All-time peak's hard. We're getting a lot of brilliant games, but I wouldn't say make it too corporate. Obviously, be a bit smarter with your money, because like you said, an extra however much on Spider-Man 2, that is ridiculous. But again, like you said, Phil, everything is more expensive now. We don't know exactly, we don't know their transaction history. We don't know where that money's been spent. We don't know if it was just a case of things getting harder to buy, prices going up, people having Spider-Man on their resume now, so they got to be paid more. Who knows? But I don't know. I think you guys make brilliant points, but it's hard to exactly find the perfect compromise, I think, for this situation. I'm hoping all these layoffs just force developers to create new studios and we get even more games and even more kind of just cash flow, I suppose. But it's hard way to work it out. It's something they need to band together and make something brilliant for that to happen. I don't know how promising that is, but God knows me. If there is a solution for this, I'm not sure what it is.
You've got to look at the upside a little bit, and I'm looking for very rosy kind of tinted glasses here with all these developers sort of leaving the big names. There's so much opportunity now for those developers to go away and start something creative themselves, work on a lower budget game to start making some bank for themselves and then get that published. They've got all the learnings from their Naughty Dogs, their Insomniacs and their bigger games that they've worked on. Why not go away now? Take this time when the market is a little loose, when it's not so aggressive, and then you could put your sort of indie titles out, those ideas that you've been dreaming about when you've been painting those finer details to Spider-Man's shiny ass. You could do all those things you've dreamed about because you have the ability to do them now. You have all those learnings, as I've said, from the big development studios. You've now got the perfect time, I believe, to be able to work on your own stuff and bring out some quality. And that would be the future of PlayStation.
All great points. And I got to say, I agree with you guys 100%. I think that, yeah, taking a more corporate stance on it for AAA would suck. And it would certainly take a lot of the magic out of it. And for me, it would just highlight why I love indies so much, because then they're able to take these experiments and to be able to take a creative risk, which AAA gaming is very much against doing right now with this current ecosystem. But I think there is one compromise that we could look at doing for this, guys, and that would be price. You mentioned, obviously, the price of everything going up, your goods going up. How would you feel about the price of video game going up even more? Because personally, I would be more than happy to spend an extra 10 or 20 quid on a game if I knew I was getting a certain level of quality in it. I wouldn't have any problem. When it went up to 70 quid or 60 quid it is now in the UK, I don't have a problem with that. I paid for 2 tickets to the Everyman Cinema to go watch The Thing. I paid 40 quid, right, to watch a 2-hour film. I'm paying like, what, an 8-hour, even an 8-hour experience, paying 70 quid, so $80. I wouldn't have a fucking problem with that at all. I think that's money well spent. And it's always a tricky one whenever you bring price and the value of gaming into the mix. But I think that is something that, with everything going up, 70 quid now is nowhere near worth, or 60 quid now is worth nowhere near what it was even 3 or 4 years ago when the PlayStation 5 launched. Would anyone be against having even a scaling price where a developer could say, I will put X amount in? How do you feel? How do you feel, guys?
To be fair, video games haven't really gone up in price. It was only the other day, again on Twitter, I spend a lot of time on Twitter, don't I, that I saw one of those old magazine clip-ins, and I think it had some N64 games, and I think Doom was 65 quid. Like, games really haven't gone up in cost. But just to address your point of more quality equals more expensive games, how are you rating that, Davey? Am I coming over to you for an objective viewpoint and your 9 out of 10s are going to cost me £90 and your 10 out of 10s going to cost me £100? How are you rating that? Is it a Metacritic? Is it, we talked a lot about game length. Is it down to game length? Is it down to studio? Are we saying just because it came from Naughty Dog it must be quality, so I'm going to charge you £90? How are you picking those values for those games?
I think that we don't pick them. Whereas at the moment it's mandated that you've got, depending on what your game is, you've got certain price points that you fuck around in. Why, like, say for example Rockstar, why don't they just be like, oh yeah, GTA 6, 100 quid? Like, why not? If they want to do that, I think that a studio should be able to make that choice and be able to say, yeah, actually, we're going to price it at X because we feel our game's worth that. And that's on them. The market would then speak to dictate the success of that. But I think that's the easiest way to do it, is you just let people be able to make their own decisions on pricing. Same way that you do for any other product that's out in the market right now. You don't have to be tied to all Sony games at $59.99 or $69.99. Someone could say, right, well, Ghost of Tsushima 2, we've made an absolute fucking banger. This cost us $500 million to make. We know there's like 70 hours worth of content here. No one's going to kick a fuss if this is 80 quid. And they put that out. And the first ones that do that will be getting a shitstorm, but it will soon become common practice.
I can see Spencer shaking his head, so I'll pass it over to you in a second, Spence. But the point I want to make on that is that if I'm a video games developer and Rockstar are bringing out their game at £100 and I choose to bring out my game at £50, is my game worth half of that? I like the standardized pricing at PlayStation because it's a level playing field, and then it gives the choice to the consumer then to pick out what he wants, and it's not based on price. If I'm looking at a game at 100, I'm looking at a game at 50. I'm like, well, I don't want the 50 quid game because it's going to be shit.
Did you feel like that with Helldivers 2 when that was 35?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Generally, like when I see a lower price game, I do feel that it's not going to be as good as the big boys. I do have that opinion, you know, price speaks. I pay for quality generally. But it's difficult, right, to do that. But that's why I'm saying I like that standardized pricing where you can kind of see at what level of quality you're coming into. But you're saying you want a bit more fluidity within this, with a sense of the game producers can choose whatever price they want. So as you're saying, GTA could be that £100.
Yeah, I do. I think that games, if they want to scale up and they want to reach like the highest echelon, it's going to cost them a lot. And if the way then that they can then measure that is they can say, right, well, we feel it's this, we've got a certain expectation. You know, someone like Rockstar, for example, the prime candidate for this, right? Because everyone knows that game's going to fucking bang.
It is the edge case scenario, though.
It is.
Here, right? Rockstar.
It is.
It's not really the majority that would be able to price at that higher echelon to be able to save the video games industry, okay? And are we really saving Rockstar? That game's going to bang either way, right? And it's going to make a lot of money. So I don't really specifically think this article that we're talking about really relates too much to Rockstar because they live in that bubble of perfection, don't they? We're talking about the slightly smaller studios that are struggling because they've spent a lot of money on a game and ultimately they haven't produced the quality that we're expecting. And we've had games that have got cancelled, such as The Last of Us multiplayer.
I would always just say that with pricing, you've got the market will speak for it no matter what. If it's standardized pricing or not, if it's 70 quid and it comes out, or $70 as the standardized pricing is, if people don't feel it's worth it, they'll wait and it will go down. So standardized pricing doesn't really matter because ultimately people will buy it at that price if they feel that that's value for them, right? And if they don't, they wait for it to reduce. And I feel like if you had more fluidity in the market, those that were really super confident in their game and what they put out, and they were able to put that extra money into the game, knowing that there's going to be a huge market that are going to buy that at the premium pricing, then it just gives them more kind of incentive to be able to invest that money into that game, knowing that they'll get a lot in on the front. And then there's people that maybe don't want to wait or don't want to pay that premium, can then wait, and it will then naturally reduce. We're not Nintendo. It's not a fixed pricing structure for the lifetime of the game. It will naturally come down depending on the market. But I would like that power to be put into the game developer's point of view rather than having to tuck it into offering a fucking statue or offering a little patch or some bollocks for the digital deluxe version. Just be able to play around with that pricing a little bit more. But Spence, you've been dying to say something here.
Yeah. There's two big points, really. So the first one, Phil, what you said about the $50 game compared to the 100 or £50 game compared to the 100. I think maybe back on the PS2, that would have been a thing. But now where we can just instantly Google the Metascore for the game, if you see a 50 quid game, you might be like, oh, that looks decent, look it up. And then you think, oh, well, how well's the 100 quid game done? You just look it up right then and there. We're in a digital age where the price isn't usually what dictates your purchase anymore, because we have the information now to know how good a game is. Even if you buy, obviously we buy for quality, we spend lots of money on quality stuff. We don't just blindly do that. We look into the products beforehand, see if they're good, and then we make the decision to spend that money. So I don't think that 50 to 100 quid thing is too probable, really. I don't think that would be too much of an issue. My big issue is, Davey, your point of the price increase. My point here is going to be Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. is 70 quid on the PS Store on digital. And we already know, sure, you can get it cheaper everywhere else. It's like 50 quid in Shop 2, 55 on Amazon. We've spoke about it in the past. The digital market is the biggest market for video games now. It's just the way it is. So most people are paying that 70. After the amount of money Rocksteady spent on this game, they would have sold it for 90 if they could. And no one would have bought it for 90. Not a single soul. It could have crushed the studio. So I think some developers, sure, they could choose the price, but they're looking at their game as it's their game. They're looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, thinking this game's sick. Look at this mechanic I've added. And everyone else is like, oh, that feels minging. I don't want to play this. I don't think it would really work too well. I think 90 quid max may be fine, but I don't think the developers or anyone could really set the prices themselves other than lowering it if they haven't spent much and they know the worth of the game. Because a lot of them will just be optimistic and say, yeah, check it out for 90. And it won't. It will not be in the top 10. And then no one will buy it afterwards because all the hype's gone. And there was enough outrage for it being that expensive in the first place.
Interesting question, and I don't know if you guys have the answer to this, but regardless of pricing, Sony still takes its cut, right? Is that cut a percentage or is it a certain value? So if a £70 game, would it be 20% or would it be £20 if it's a £50 game? How does that all work? Do you have a bit more insight into that, Davey?
Yeah, it's percentage based. So it is a percentage. I could find the percentage for you. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know it's a percentage. So they're going to make more back from the higher amounts. Yeah, 100%. So Sony would be laughing on the back end if there was fluidity in pricing. I think the interesting thing would be how the market would shake out if someone did start going this way and what that would mean. Like you mentioned about Suicide Squad, Spence. I don't think anybody in their right mind, even though Warner Brothers definitely aren't in their right mind and they're absolutely fucking insane, they must have known the tea leaves when they looked at pre-orders and stuff like that. Like, and the amount of negativity that's about this game, if they had priced that up, I'm surprised they didn't drop the price on that game to get more people through the door. Like, this is the thing. I think there's not a way in hell, if pricing was already fluid, that they would have gone in with like the upper premium level because they knew what they had, and everyone in the studio knew what they had. Like, people know when they've made something that they're not happy with, right? They know. You can't be that blind, surely. Like, they knew that this wasn't going to be what they wanted, and if they didn't know, the social media outrage to it was fucking evident enough, surely to God.
I think they were blind. I really do, because the number of developers that I saw celebrating once this game had gone gold, and they were all having their discs in really lovely display cases and all signed.
Bro.
Why? Why would you have that on your wall? I wouldn't even have it on my CV. I wouldn't even have it on my shelf behind me that you can't see. Bit in the bin. But they did that. They had it all signed, all really nice in a frame. I wonder where that lives now.
I reckon they were celebrating not having to work on that piece of shit anymore. I think they were just like, it's done! Yes! Let's go! Or straight to the pub. I will say, do you boys have your guesses? I know the percent that Sony take per digital purchase. What are your guesses for it?
Ooh, put a shot on it, Phil, because we don't have many. Closest wins?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Do you want me to go first?
Ladies first.
All right. I reckon they take 7.5%.
Okay, so on OnlyFans, they take 20%, don't they, Spence?
I couldn't tell you, mate.
I'll go 20%.
Well, Phil wins. It's 30%.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
30% commission. Yeah.
Wow. That's high. Super high.
It's ridiculously high.
That is a lot of money.
Sony makes bank, man.
But Sony controls all that, don't they? So there's this fluid approach I think they would obviously benefit from, because obviously you'll have all the developers feeling like their game is the best thing since sliced bread, but ultimately having some sort of control over it. I personally believe, objectively believe, that Sony being able to control these is ultimately better for the consumer. I really do. Because as you've mentioned, we would have people like Warner Brothers trying to sell you a piece of turd for £100 and then them getting their £70 after Sony takes its cut. So Yeah, I don't want that as a future. All the things you're coming up with tonight, Davey, I do not want. I can see the logic, but I just don't want it to happen. So I agree with you, but hate agreeing with you.
I don't want to agree with myself either, but it just makes sense. I'm just reading the tea leaves and it's coming up with this kind of line. And I don't want that to happen. I quite like having the pricing structure we got now. It's lovely. And it certainly protects us for a long period of time for that entire generation. So I don't really want it to change. But logic is a mistress that I can't quite escape, I'm afraid, Phil. I can't quite escape.